What is the most random NSFW history fact that you didn't learn in school? President Warren G. Harding had a 6-year-long affair with a lady named Nan Britton, who in her autobiography said that she and Harding had sex in a closet in the White House, and claimed that Harding was the father of her daughter. At the time of its publishing, the book was met with public ridicule and widely discounted as the stuff of pornographic fiction. Britton was labeled a sex pervert and degenerate, and a book was even written to counter her claims about Harding, who was married to another woman. It was confirmed in 2015 through ancestry DNA testing that the descendants of Harding and Britton were indeed related. I read that Victor Hugo slept with so many prostitutes that all the brothels in Paris were closed on the day of his death because they all took the day off to mourn his death. La Palatine, Louis XIV's second sister-in-law, who had quite a temper, replied harshly to the king, slapped her son, a prince in public, loved to take craps in the outdoor. She wrote countless letters saying she hated Versailles because she had to crap around valets, and thus could not enjoy her crap dropping. There are little penises carved/engraved on the pavement in Pompeii that point towards brothels. Those little sticks survived volcanic eruption, as did some NSFW paintings inside the buildings. There was a Victorian sexual purity activist who was staunchly anti-masturbation. Unsurprisingly, descriptions of masturbation in general society at the time were so broad and so couched in euphemism that one day she found out that she'd actually been masturbating for years without knowing that that's what she'd been doing. That the ancient Egyptians believed that the god Atum, after creating himself from water, created two other gods, Shu and Tefnut, to build the world either by masturbating and spitting his own semen from his mouth, or having sexual intercourse with his shadow depending on the myth. Edit. Just noticed a repeated word and I can't live with that. King Edward VII really loved prostitutes, but found himself hindered by his weight, so he had a special chair commissioned to keep at his favorite French brothel. His chair allowed him to have threesomes with the prostitutes, while also being able to support his weight, since he didn't want to crush his partner. Fath Ali Shah Qajar, second king in Qajar dynasty in Iran, about 200 years ago, had 160 wives. Nasiruddin Shah Qajar had about 50. In Islam you're not allowed to marry more than 4 wives at the same time. It is said that Nasiruddin Shah was once walking in his palace and saw a beautiful girl and asked if he could marry her. Everyone was looking at him weirdly, and he asked why. One of his servants said that she was his daughter. Charles II, Charles the Impotent, was the convergence point for several generations of royal inbreeding, and was born with significant disabilities. His parents were desperate for him to produce an heir. They implemented a system of ropes and pulleys to lower virgins onto him in hopes he could impregnate one. It didn't work, and the dynasty collapsed. The Palace of Versailles in France was huge, and had numerous people coming in and out, because of a number of reasons. If people really needed to, they would defecate or piss in any corner of the palace and just leave it there. It was also nearby a river of sewage, so just coming near the palace reeked. It's not how you would like to imagine Marie Antoinette living. Queen Victoria loved sex, as attested by her 9 kids in about 18 years. She loved sex but hated pregnancy. She never announced her pregnancies. The newspapers would report that she became ill for an afternoon. Then boom. New royal prince or princess. Also, any woman who have had painkillers during labor can thank Queen Victoria. She helped popularize the use of chloroform during birth. Pretty sure they had to write to the Archbishop of Canterbury for permission, as labor is supposed to be painful. Bible. Original sin. etc. 12-year-old Pocahontas used to entertain white colonists with nude cartwheels. This is actually one of the few things we know about her that's indisputable. That Genghis Khan ducked enough of Asia to ensure his bloodline would continue for generations regardless of what peoples lived or died. Lyndon Johnson had a huge cock, which he nicknamed Jumbo. He was famous for pulling it out to assert dominance, or talking to people randomly at the urinals with it out. Personally, I was thrilled they brought up this detail in The Crown. Catherine the Great of Russia was quite fond of sex. She had multiple lovers, many of them much younger than her. Her last lover, Prince Zubov, was 40 years younger than her. She often raised her lovers to high positions and gave them gifts. She had also Le Pravus, tester of male capacity, who had sex with any potential lovers before they were allowed to spend the night with Catherine. This person was Countess Praskova Bruce, confidante of her. Catherine had also erotic art and furniture. Legends say that she died while having sex with horse, but this is not actually the case. The group of people who lived in ancient Peru who would go to great pains to only depict sodomy on their pottery, they were super anal about only depicting certain sex acts, if you catch my drift. Rasputin convinced tons of women to sleep with him using religion, claiming that forgiveness was the highest grace and that unless you sinned, you could not be forgiven. Poet Shel Silverstein used to work for Playboy magazine and was good friends with Hefner. He spent a great deal of his time at the Playboy mansion. Don't know if this is fact or fiction, but Napoleon allegedly had a huge sweat fetish. Whenever he'd be at war or wherever far away from home, he would write letters to his wife telling her not to bathe until he'd come home. The Egyptians did not wear helmets to build the Great Pyramids. Turns out Anne Frank talks a lot about masturbation in her diary. The person who killed Simone de Montfort sent his detached ballsack to his wife, who then wore them on her hat as it turned out. King Louis XVI had a chamber pot with a picture of Ben Franklin in the bottom, given to a lady who Franklin had bedded. Hitler started the first anti-smoking campaign, and commissioned the first blow-up dolls to be made for his soldiers, so they would stop getting STDs from prostitutes. They were convenient, because they could be folded, and fit in their rucksacks easy, and take up little room and little weight. And there was a female Nazi scientist named Elsa. She was studying the effects of gangrene, syphilis, and how much pain the body could take among other diseases. She also believed that women were superior to men, and that women had superior pain thresholds to men. Sorry for any spelling or grammar, I'm dyslexic. 1. Zeus ducked everyone and everything too. Famed Irish writer James Joyce was raunchy AF. My grandfather was hospitalized for almost 3 months during WWI because he ducked his way through France and contracted super gonorrhea. Ben Franklin loved to duck. It's rumored he even boned the Queen of France. Ancient Egyptians used to use crocodile dung as a contraceptive by shoving dried dung up their hoo-ha to form an impenetrable barrier. There were human zoos up to 1958. Last one in Belgium. Human zoos were very common on Europe and North America, usually displaying indigenous people from Africa and South Asia. It was quite popular and wasn't seen as weird. They even displayed Pygmy people as the missing link. Edit. An article about this. While gay sex was illegal in the UK in the 19th century, lesbian sex wasn't, because the patriarchal government refused to believe it was a thing. A Moldavian heresiarch in the Middle Ages, who founded his little sect on ideals of sexual freedom and pretty prescient notions in regards to individualism, also employed a massive harem of fingerers. He did not select his concubines according to external beauty, but only cared about the respective length and width of their fingers. In other words, he used his sexual servants like a collection of multi-jointed dildos. Reportedly his favorite was a burly lumberjack with broad yet dexterous fingers, which had to regularly be shorn to maintain proper hygiene and appeal. I've heard that on the Lewis and Clark expedition, quicksilver, mercury, was used as an ingredient in medicine, given to treat STDs. Some of the mercury would end up in their urine, and so be released into the soil. Apparently this was a common enough occurrence that years later, checking soil for mercury content was a method used to retrace their route. The whole history of colonization of Congo by Belgium is NSFW. They used to chop off hands of their slaves if they didn't fill out their daily quota. Men, women, children, no exception. Disturbing article. Father stares at the hand and foot of his 5-year-old. Severed as a punishment for failing to make the daily rubber quota. Belgian Congo. 1904. The image of a witch flying with a broomstick comes from women that rubbed hallucination drugs in their vaginas using a broomstick. Ben Franklin fancied French prostitutes. Rape of Nanking. Japan really doesn't get enough crap for all the war crimes they committed during the war.